Good morning, Tri-Cities. It's 9 o'clock on Friday, so it's time for Coffee with Karl. I'm Karl Dye from TRIDEC, and today is the next part of our 22nd annual Economic Outlook series. We're doing it virtually this year, obviously, with the COVID situation. Today, we've got our Federal Outlook program, and we've got a great list of guests that I think we'll have some really good conversations today. So I'll introduce them one by one. I'll start with Roger Snyder. Roger is the site manager for Department of Energy with the Pacific Northwest Site Office. Good morning, Roger.
Morning, Karl. Good to be here.
Thanks for joining us. We also have Tim Peckinpaugh, who is a partner with K&L Gates. He is TRIDEC's lobbyist in Washington, D.C., and he is our expert on all federal affairs. Good morning, Tim.
Good morning, Karl. Great to be here.
You bet. And we also have Brian Vance. There's Brian. Brian, thanks for joining us this morning. He is the manager for Department of Energy, both the Richland Operations Office and the Office of River Protection. Good morning, Brian.
Good morning. How are you? I'm sorry, my video seems frozen. I'll fix that somehow in a moment or so.
Oh, no worries. It's the Zoom virtual world that we live in. If we didn't have one technology hiccup, I don't think it'd be a real meeting anymore. All right. Well, for our audience on Zoom, we will be using the question and answer feature. If you have a question for our guest today, you can put it in the question and answer box, and we'll do our best to get to it at the second part of the program today. If you're watching on social media, you can ask a question in the comment section. And again, we'll get to those as we go through our discussion. So it's our tradition on Coffee with Karl to start off with talking about our mugs or coffee. And I pulled out of the archives. It's kind of hard to see because there's so much sunshine today, but it's the old TRIDEC logo before we went to kind of the unified logo. And I just picked that one because, TRIDEC has a very long history with Department of Energy and its predecessor federal agencies, on the Hanford site and with the lab both. And, that history and that relationship and that partnership is really the theme, I think, of today. So I thought that was a good, mug to start off with. So let's go to Roger next. Roger, what do you got for a mug or a coffee story for us this morning?
Well, I've got actually a gift from one of my kids at the time. And so it's pictures of 2012 when we first moved here to the area. And so it's a good reminder of things that have come and gone here in the community.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for sharing it. Brian, how about you? Do you have a coffee or a mug story? And your camera looks like it's working good now.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out which one I'm on. Yeah, I've got a mug that I got when I was with Arriva. They sent a group of people to Harvard Business School for like a 10-day mini boot camp, and so I try to put this on my desk to remind me when I was probably a lot smarter. So it's just a way of refreshing my memory of younger days and smarter days for me.
Oh, that's awesome. And Brian, I know you're a Navy veteran. Thank you for your service. I had a question for you on Navy coffee. Is it true that Navy coffee has some salt in it, or is that just a myth?
I was atypical in the Navy because I was never a coffee drinker.
Okay.
Because on submarines, we stood 6-hour watches, and if you drink coffee, you have to go to the restroom, and there was nowhere to go. So I chose not to do that, and that was my story.
That's awesome. Tim, how about your coffee or mug story?
Well, I'm a little different. It's lunchtime here in Washington, D.C., where I am, and I've already had plenty of coffee, so I'm going to stop the coffee drinking. But I did pull out this glass. I drink iced tea in the afternoons. I'm not sure you can see it, but it's a TRIDEC anniversary glass that was done in 2013 on the 50th anniversary of TRIDEC. I was there for the ceremony that was held. Great event, I thought. And Karl, it goes back to your mug. This is back in the day when they had a different logo and partnership very much as it is today, the theme for TRIDEC. And it was a very great night and great memories. And I thought it would be appropriate as I drink iced tea, not coffee, to have more of an iced tea drinking glass.
That's perfect. Thanks, Tim. Well, we're going to go through and give each of our panelists, around 10 minutes to go through a presentation on their area. So we're going to kick it off with Brian. Brian, I think Tracy's going to run your slides. So take it away, Brian.
Great. So as always, I appreciate the opportunity to present at this forum. I think it's important given our role in the community. I will do my very best to cover a $2.6 billion a year enterprise in 10 minutes in 13 slides. So, hang on to your hats. We're going to go very quickly here. So next slide. Really just a little bit about the history of the site. Most of you recognize this: 9 reactors, 20 million pieces of uranium metal fuel produced, 110,000 tons of fuel that had been irradiated, processed to deliver 66% of the nation's plutonium. And it was a very chemical intensive process. So we have, as of today, 177 underground tanks with about 56 million gallons of waste, and all of the infrastructure around the site to remediate as a part of our overall mission. Next slide. Just a quick view of the enterprise as we stand today. We're one of 16 remaining EM sites in the nation. We're the biggest by far, really by twice. 580 square mile site, about 40 miles of the Columbia River. Our mission is pretty self-evident there. I won't read those words to you. 2 DOE offices, about 350 federal employees with a couple hundred support staff, and our key site activities are listed there. Really topped with deliver safe and efficient and secure operations. We recognize our importance to the economic center of the state and the region, and we take that very, very seriously. Because if we have a bad day, we recognize that we could influence our agricultural industry, the Tri-Cities communities, and the wine industry, and really the Columbia River in the center of the Pacific Northwest economics. So we really do focus on ensuring that we do our mission well to protect the economic center, or really the Pacific Northwest. Next slide. We've got an impressive history of cleanup progress here, not always recognized for what's been accomplished. 6 of the 9 reactors cocooned. We're on the path to the last 2. 26 billion with a B gallons of groundwater treated. Over 900 facilities demolished. 1,300 waste sites remediated. Really tremendous history of performance, but we still obviously have a ways to go. And we built the capability to treat tank waste. Next slide. Just very quickly, our overall DOE corporate or contractor team structure. The department on the left, you see the HMIS, Hanford Mission Integration Solutions. That's the replacement for Mission Support Alliance, the integrator for the site. CPCCCO is the replacement for CHPRC on the Central Plateau. Both those transitions were completed during COVID and completed in January. You see the 222S lab, WHL, WAI at the bottom. That contract is in the midst of a transition. Our occupational medical provider there is at the 4 o'clock position on the clock. And then Bechtel Waste Treatment Plant, Washington River Protection Solutions Tank Farms. The scope that both of those contractors are evolving to under a new contract, integrated tank disposal contract, where a draft RFP was just issued in late February. So that's the picture of the main contractors at the DOE site today at Hanford. Next slide. In a period of change and opportunity, change drivers are pretty well understood. The ones that are not always as recognized as the administration change, national leadership changes, regional with our Region 10 administrator for EPA, local changes. And when we talk about site operations, we're moving to tank waste treatment in the not too distant future. Our 5 main themes on the right are the things we've always focused on. And we focused on these before the pandemic, through the pandemic, and as we go into the future. At the leadership level, this is what we focus on as a Hanford leadership team every single day, and anchored first and foremost on the health and safety of the workforce. Next slide. Our economic impact in the community is large, 2.6 billion in 2021, 2.6 in 2020. Obviously a lot of dollars going out to subcontractors as well, 674 million in 2020. We have a site workforce of about 11,000. We DOE, and that doesn't include PNNL. I think we're the largest employer in the Tri-Cities areas, largest single employer through our contractors. And you can see the spread of the funds between Richland and Officer of Protection, and really the total, and how much of those dollars actually go out to subcontractors. We look at the current state as being relatively stable. going forward from a funding perspective, from a site numbers perspective. We might see some differences in the skills mix over time, but very simply the same. And we certainly, you know, if stimulus occurs, and Tim might have some insights on whether stimulus, what it's going to look like, that will certainly factor in. But and we always have a stimulus package prepared, but the conditions of the stimulus sometimes change. So we're ready for that if we get that opportunity. If not, we'll certainly just continue to execute what I think is already a pretty significant mission here. Next slide. Just big picture across the site, the projects we'll be working over the next 5 years, nothing really new in that. We do focus very heavily as well on tank integrity programs, general risk reduction across the site. What we don't always talk a lot about is the infrastructure. We're the half the size of Rhode Island, and we have to provide all the water, sewer, power, roads, the entire infrastructure for the site. And so infrastructure is always a part of what we do, and we are always looking for opportunities to accelerate the mission. Next slide. I only put this up. This is our simplified version of direct feed low activity waste. I only put it up there for everyone to recognize that that is a site-wide machine, from the tank farms to the waste treatment plant to the integrated disposal facility, but also with all the infrastructure that's got to be out there to support it. Both DOE offices, every site contractor has a role in the delivery of tank waste treatment through DF law. And every one of these facilities is undergoing upgrades in parallel with the waste treatment plant to be ready when we're ready to start, turn on the melters and start vitrifying waste. So really a site-wide machine. And so that's why when we talk about cultural transition, it's not a small subsection of our site. It's 11,000 people all shifting in mindset to a pace that is really reminiscent of what it was in the 70s and 80s at the site the last time. Next slide. Just a couple of pictures of what we've accomplished and are accomplishing. A lot of this work was done during COVID. You can see that concrete pad, that's where the ion exchange columns from the TISCR, which will tank size seas removal, will prepare the waste for the waste treatment plant. That infrastructure is there and ready. As you probably heard, we completed the construction, all construction at the waste treatment plant to support DF law. And so that's, after 20 years of work, really a major accomplishment. And then bottom left, you can see that's an actual picture of what a glass canister will look like on the we call it a bogey, we'll call it a trolley, that moves that canister in our port cave area. And you can see some other progress there across the site. We've made connections between the waste treatment plant and other parts to make sure everything's connected as we go forward. Next slide. We're also, continuing to reduce risks. You can see AX104, AX102. Those are two of the single shell tanks. That's what a 1 million gallon tank looks like on the inside after it's been retrieved. You can see the pump and treat facility there in the middle. We still continue to pump and treat 2 billion gallons a year. Lower left is interesting because that was a stabilization of one of the 3 underground structures we identified as high risk. The left is the before, the right is the middle is the after, and what you can see is the pool of grout concrete in there that covers the material that would have been at risk, and really is just almost up to the roof to make sure that if there's a collapse, there's no risk of the contamination getting out. And then you can see the capsule storage area. That's where the Westlift capsules will go when we put them into dry storage in just a few years. Next slide. Really just the 2 last major areas along the Columbia River, K Basin and 324, both projects will be moving forward this year as well. And my get off the stage slide, the last one, is the next slide. This is the one Hanford vision that we are really working to create that 11,000 person workforce, all pulling in the same direction, all driving the risk reduction and project delivery excellence that we want to be as strive for every day. COVID has impacted all of our schedules, and that shouldn't be a surprise, but we've been able to continue to make impressive process in a safe and healthy environment. We adopted COVID protocols from the very beginning, and we really are optimistic about what we can accomplish together in the future. With that, I'll turn it back over to Karl, and hopefully I met my 10-minute rule.
Yeah, you totally did. Thanks, Brian. That was great. And I just wanted to say that Undersecretary DeBar, when he was here I guess at the end of last year, it was great. You had a chance that we could do a virtual meeting with them, and he was very complimentary of the work of you and your team and all the work that's been accomplished, during his administration and, his time in DOE. And I think that was a great feedback really from headquarters on the great work that you guys are doing and the accomplishments you're making. So I wanted to.
Yeah, very much appreciated. We got a lot of great support.
Yeah, no, I think that's, me and the new guy, it's very, very, very impressive, the work that's been done, really over the course of Hanford, but making significant progress and meeting those goals. And I think that's what we're all here for, right? To make sure that the work's done, it's safe, and everything you guys are doing. So thanks for that overview. That was great. We're going to go to Roger next and give Roger some time to run through some slides and kind of give us the overview from your perspective. Roger, take it away.
Thanks, Karl. Actually, let me go ahead and share, because I think it probably is just as easy to go along through the slides as we talk.
You bet.
Okay, hopefully that came through. Okay, so the first slide is actually a message of itself. One of the things that we do in support of the Hanford site is studying glass. And so the image you see is actually ancient glass, some of the world's oldest glass, and we're understanding the stability over time. So it aids right into the Hanford long-term mission. But, it's a very exciting time right here in terms of being inside DOE, inside being at PNNL. We have a new administration in place. Secretary Granholm is confirmed and on board. And we think our core strengths here at PNNL are well aligned to the initiatives in clean energy, climate science, net zero. And we're already known for helping find and deploy solutions for others, for other agencies here within the department. See if I can get this to advance. There we go. Our core, and maybe a bit of a background on PNNL for some of our newer viewers. PNNL is one of the 17 national labs. It's probably one of the most diverse. At our core is the chemistry, earth sciences, understanding the earth, the data science that goes with all this data, and biology. And we shape those around with nuclear material management and threat analysis, and then of course, sustainable energy. And so we employ these technologies in these key science areas. We now have over 5,000 staff here at PNNL. That is our current record high. So it's been a good year from a standpoint of moving forward, even during a pandemic. And we've also seen record budgets. So 1.1 billion last year and looking good, hopefully, for 2021. One of the issues to just kind of think about, though, is during the pandemic, a lot of things do change and a lot of impacts in the community. With COVID protection protocols and a very resilient staff, we've been able to maintain one invention, basically a day, and 2 patents a month. And so from that standpoint, the pace of innovation has continued on. And that's a testament to our workforce. Our staff are our greatest asset, and this actually shows how diverse the workload that they work on is. So you can see that we're roughly balanced between the work we do in the basic sciences, and we can turn that same expertise and even those same staff at times working on the challenges of the environment, which includes Hanford, or whether it's the grid or other forms of energy. And then that same skill set, some of those same people and others focus on national security. So it is a very diverse workforce and a diverse work activity. Very different than, say, the Hanford site, which has a very clear and focused mission. That said, science is not a game you spin and do by yourself. It is not alone working in a lab in some dark corner. The challenges of today really take a large group of people, a diverse cadre of folks, and skill sets that require people to collaborate and work together. So that said, we have begun a process in the last few years of really expanding our joint appointments. These are researchers that both are at a foreign, a domestic or foreign institution that work here, or are experts helping out the problems at other institutions. Now we're up to 172 such appointments with 44 institutions. We also have been able to expand our graduate programs, and now with 5 universities, we're sending their graduate students through PNNL to help develop not only the next generation of students and capability, but also bringing their new insights into our equation. One of the cohorts I would highlight here on the screen is the WSU graduates. Here they spent time here at PNNL, and it's not only about the progress and the activities that they work on that are part of our mission, but it's also their journey and their interests, and they're completing their in some cases their doctoral programs, and in others it's just applying new skill sets to new technologies. It's a very exciting time for all in that way. One thing I would also remind some of our local residents too, as well as people viewing, is that PNNL is just off the Hanford site. We are part of the city. And so although it's a hard to see map, it's a fairly contained campus. And those of you that come to it would see the tree line as a good indicator of that. And actually you can see that in this photo. And from a standpoint of change, we've been working for the last decade in a process of campus transformation. And those of you who've been driving by and driving through and visiting, you've seen the constant construction and the change and the evolution. In this picture alone, we've got 4 new facilities and that weren't there at the 2012 discussion that I did in TRIDEC, showing our plans for the future. So we have been executing that vision for the last decade. But I would draw your attention to the square that's in the right-hand quadrant. That empty looking square has been our most recent focus. And our first new facility is coming out of the ground and will be done this year. The Energy Sciences Center, which will be used to transform waste and research relative to fuels and materials, new catalysts, maybe addressing vehicle emissions, safer, cheaper means of energy storage, and even the concepts behind agricultural fertilizers are the kinds of research that this facility will be involved in. We look forward to being in this facility by the end of this year. And again, a big leap forward in our campus on that new square. Right next door, also announced this week, is our grid storage launchpad, which has just got approved by the administration to go into the design and construction phase. So this is another exciting development. This facility really focuses on grid energy storage. So with all those windmills and water energy production, now you're looking at large batteries and how that plays into the grid and how that can be used to offset when the wind doesn't blow, et cetera. So this provides a unique capability for validation of industry systems as they start to become more common. We hope it'll accelerate the pace of technology, so we have more research and testing, and result in more collaborations, industry standards and approaches to these common challenges. This will be in design here shortly this year, and then we'll start seeing it pop out of the ground in about a year. And then from that standpoint, we're probably 2.5 years to 3 years away from having this facility to celebrate. So again, a very exciting time for our campus, lots of change. Couple touch points, trying to keep my time short. Another area that's really key to understanding PNNL is STEM. And that's a touch point with the community. It affects a lot of people here locally. Patel has made a huge impact as our operator of the lab in the STEM field within the state as a whole. One aspect I would highlight that they sponsor our Science Bowl. And so we just did our virtual Science Bowl during the pandemic. We also do internships. We did virtual internships during the pandemic, keeping that moving forward. And then the other program that's really exciting and interesting to see how it's continuing to grow is our STEM ambassadors. These are staff that engage the community, engage in the schools, and share their expertise and their excitement for the STEM field, and augment the capabilities we have through our regular teaching and our other developmental activities in the region. We now have 112 active STEM ambassadors, and 84 of those are focused right here in our community. And so it's, again, a very exciting activity and continuing during the pandemic. The last item, because I would be remiss if we didn't talk about the pandemic, it dominates so much of our life these days, is that PNNL has been active during the pandemic, focused on COVID-19. Whether this is actually using our scientific capabilities on the virus itself, looking at ways to strengthen the supply chain as we are now affected by the international and domestic challenges of production, to even doing testing on the COVID tests themselves. And so we have been applying science in the interest of the nation during this period of time, focused on hopefully a better understanding of COVID-19 as we go forward. That, Karl, I think would probably be a good place to stop, just to give a good overview of what's going on here at PNNL, some of the things that people might see as they drive by, and just a sense of the achievements we've been able to do during the pandemic.
That's perfect, Roger. That it reminds me of before I had a chance to come down and interview for this job, I was still up in Lewiston, and I had a meeting with one of the directors from Idaho National Lab. And I just remember, like I said, this before I even knew the opportunity to come here to the Tri-Cities. And I just remember her telling me about all the things that PNNL was doing. And this is coming from her at INL, right? Which obviously has a very specific nuclear mission, but she was just going like, there is so much research and so much diversity of the research that's going on PNNL. I mean, I could almost, sense a little bit of jealousy in her voice, which I think, I just remember that story because I think that's exactly what you just showed. Like, it's incredible, the breadth and width of the research that's going on in PNNL. And I mean, 2 patents a month and an invention a day during COVID are some amazing figures. I think that just gives a little bit of a glimpse on how much research, and not just pure research, but pure research that leads to intellectual property, and inventing and patenting, which, is a huge part that we as TRIDEC would like to do more, with PNNL and the team there, to say, how can we help commercialize, start new companies, bring companies in, kind of help add to our economic base by that. But it's such a huge driver. I think those are great numbers.
Well, we have a group of people that focus on getting our technology out of the laboratory and into industry. But at any one point, we have 2,000 plus active projects going on. So it's clearly a place that's changing all the time.
Totally. Thanks for that overview. That was great. We'll ask Tim to jump in next. And there you go. There's Tim. Tim, I know you don't have any slides, but you want to kind of give us just a general overview of how's it going in DC, and maybe talk about some of the programs that you're tracking very closely and what's coming up.
I'd be happy to, Karl, and thanks for the invitation. Great to be here today talking to folks with TRIDEC. First of all, I want to congratulate the great work that Brian and Roger talked about. My job in Washington, D.C. is much easier when I have good material to work with, and they provide us excellent material. Brian, great job on the focus mission, the success, the accomplishments there at Hanford Cleanup, and Roger, the grid storage launchpad. What a great piece of good news. It's sort of the first big issue I think that the Secretary has dealt with that affects the Tri-Cities. So we're very proud of your accomplishment there and showing big success for the laboratory as well. So any event, that's, like I say, it makes my job easier in Washington, D.C., knowing that there's a good story to be told, and I can use that to lobby effectively on behalf of the budgets in the community. Speaking of budgets, I'll talk briefly about that. FY21, that's now done. It was done in December, finally, after a very long process. The numbers are good, as both Brian and Roger pointed out, 2.6 billion plus for Hanford Cleanup and 1.1 billion for laboratory, and that's a significant part of the economy, obviously, for the Tri-Cities. Every year we have to go back and do it again with respect to securing appropriations to support these key programs. So FY22 is now upon us. The process is starting late this year. Usually it starts off with a budget request from the administration. We now had a change in administration. The new OMB administrator has not yet been confirmed by the Senate, so they've had a little slow start in developing their budget request for FY22. They may release a so-called skinny budget request sometime late this month, and then probably April or May, they'll release the more detailed FY22 budget submission, which will include the more detailed documents, the so-called volumes that point out how individual programs will be funded as part of the request from this new administration. They have different priorities than the prior administration, obviously, so I would expect to see a lot more funding in DOE in the renewable sector, in particular, energy efficiency, renewable energy, Big focus on transmission, grid security issues, electric vehicles. So there'll be a lot of new funds in the budget request for those areas. Hopefully that will not squeeze out funding for Hanford and the laboratory. I suspect that DOE will get a lot of pressure the priorities, but we're hopeful that EM, for example, in the DOE science accounts will be level funded, maybe slight increases, but level funding might be a more realistic scenario for those accounts, given the pressure to provide funding increases elsewhere that would fit the Biden agenda. So with that budget request, we will then start the congressional budget process, including setting a top line funding number through some sort of budget resolution, followed by hearings and followed by authorizations and appropriations. At the authorization level, Hanford cleanup's funded through the authorization bill that's done every year, the so-called NDAA. And that's a very important bill to come. It always passes, by the way. It's passed 60 years in a row. And so that becomes a great vehicle for lobbyists like me to use, because that's a good guarantee of getting a result across the goal line during the fiscal year. And there's also authorizations in the DOE science accounts that support PNNL. But really, it's the appropriations that count. That's where the check gets written every year by the Congress. And the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill does everything for us. It funds all of Hanford cleanup, and the vast majority of PNNL is also funded by the Energy and Water Appropriations Bill. It funds all of DOE, basically. And so that's our focus every year, is working that appropriations process. And we are very lucky in the House side that we have 3 Washington State members on the Energy and Water Appropriations Subcommittee. We have Dan Newhouse, your local member, who's on that subcommittee. And we also have Derek Kilmer, who represents the peninsula and part of Tacoma, a Democrat on the subcommittee, as well as Jamie Herrera-Bulla is now back on the subcommittee. She represents Vancouver and part of Southwest Washington. So I'm sure other states are saying, gosh, three from one state on one small subcommittee. Well, we'll take it. Very helpful for us to have that kind of power, if you will, and influence. It's also bipartisan. Also speaks to the fact that's a very important topic for our state. I mean, energy and water issues sort of speak to Washington State. And I think all 3 members go there because they understand the importance and the topicality of those issues that affect the entire state of Washington. On the Senate side, Energy and Water Appropriations, we're also very happy to have Patty Murray, our senior senator, as a very senior and powerful member of Energy and Water Appropriations on the Senate side. And she is very focused on the Hanford cleanup mission. It's very much one of her central priorities every single year. We are very lucky to have her, a real powerhouse in the Senate, on that subcommittee. There's no question that the staff and other members know that Patty always puts Hanford first as a priority, also PNNL as well. So we're very lucky to have members in our delegation well positioned on the most important single subcommittee for appropriations affecting our region. So that's part of our game in DC, is to work well with our colleagues in a bipartisan way to secure the appropriations. So what's going to happen? I don't got a clue. I wish I had a better line on that, but really don't. It's a different year, obviously. We have a new administration, a late budget request. We have new priorities coming in. We have the pandemic, obviously, is still driving much of the activity on Capitol Hill. And I guess my biggest fear would be sort of fiscal fatigue. We are spending a lot of money right now. Just did $1.9 billion yesterday on the pandemic bill that the president pushed through. We have other bills coming up that will be also in $1 trillion categories. And so one issue is, at what point does fiscal fatigue set in and they start paying more attention to the top line on the appropriations bills? And that, of course, could affect us if the top line is somewhat constrained. So that's one cautionary caveat I have, is just to make sure we understand that we're part of a broader context of fiscal spending, and we are spending well above our means right now. And the deficit, of course, is now several $1 trillion a year, not just over our lifetime, but a year now. And so at some point, we'll see if that comes back to roost and if that's going to put more pressure just on annual appropriations. On the good news side, however, as was referenced by Brian, there will be a stimulus bill that's coming along here as the next big package. We just passed the $1.9 billion bill focused on pandemic relief, and now we're focused on trying to stimulate the economy. And so there'll be an infrastructure bill, probably $2 trillion or more. That's the next big bite. And that bill could be a vehicle for doing shovel-ready projects, including Hanford cleanup, as well as some laboratory work as well at PNNL. Don't know yet. They're still developing the details of that. I think we'll focus probably more on traditional infrastructure, focused particularly in the clean technology area and climate change area. Cleanup for Hanford could get some action. We'll see. Actually, Patty Murray will probably drive that process. She was very successful on the last big stimulus bill, so-called ARA bill, passed in 2009, that did have significant funding for Hanford cleanup and gave us really an extra year of funding, really 2 years of funding in 1 year. So that was very helpful. But I wouldn't bank on that for this time, but we'll sort of try our damnedest to get as much money we can in that big infrastructure bill that affects the Tri-Cities. You know what, then I'm gonna go ahead and stop. And I look forward to questions. And again, just to say congratulations to our team out there, and you give us a nice topic to work with and good successes to work with in terms of getting more appropriations for FY22 as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. And you mentioned the word dam, and on top of my mind is, can you give us maybe just a real brief perspective on Congressman Simpson's proposal for the lower Snake River dams? Obviously, we've had a lot of discussion about that, and today we're talking about DOE, but just maybe a quick, from a congressional delegation point of view, and then I think there was maybe a thought from he and his staff that could be potentially included in a future stimulus bill. So just
that's right.
take on that.
Yes, well, a very interesting topic. It's politically intriguing for those of us who like the Washington, D.C. insider game. Mike Simpson, who chairs or used to chair Energy and Water Appropriations, now is the ranking Republican Energy and Water Appropriations from Idaho. He has the Eastern District, including Idaho Falls and the Idaho site. He's actually a very decent, respected, well-liked member, but he has a strong personal passion for taking care of salmon runs, particularly going to Idaho. And after 2 or 3 years of review, he and his staff have launched a proposal that would breach the 4 dams on the lower Snake River and provide an enormous compensation program of $34 billion to make whole those who are adversely impacted of those dams coming out, including those who provide transportation, like those with barges, as well as the farmers, as well as the irrigators, as well as, of course, those who rely upon the cheap, affordable power, as well as reliable power from those dams. And it's a huge impact upon Lewiston, upon the Tri-Cities, given the ports that those have become because of the navigation created by those dams. It's a big issue. And Mike is very serious about it. He's going to push it. The delegation from our state right now is mostly not with him. I mean, certainly Dan Newhouse and McMorris Rogers from Eastern Washington and Herrera Butler from, again, Vancouver strongly oppose the proposal. Others are very much just waiting very carefully to see what they want to do, not really endorsing or excluding at this point. Folks in Idaho, where Mike is from, seem to be mostly opposed to the proposal. Russ Vulture, who represents Lewiston and up to Coeur d'Alene, strongly opposes. And just recently, a number of key stakeholders in Idaho, folks in the state legislature, have come out thumbs down on the proposal. So it is a politically very interesting topic. You're right that Mike has identified the stimulus bill on infrastructure as the vehicle for doing his package. And his theory is this is the once in a lifetime, again, multi-trillion-dollar bill that would create enough headroom to do a $34 billion package to rescue salmon, if you will, in the Pacific Northwest. So we'll see what's going to happen. It's just really an interesting proposal. And I know the community has very strong views, as they should, about the proposal. And I've heard them before and say it again. You should step up and communicate your concerns about the proposal to our delegation, all the congressional folks, even to Mike Simpson, if you'd like. I might add that from what I do, we're very aware of Mike's role as a very powerful member of Energy and Water Appropriations, again, former chair, current ranking Republican, and who's been very fair to Hanford, quite frankly. He recognized Hanford, even though it might be competitive to his own site on some funding streams, as being very understanding that we are a bigger site and have probably higher risk. And so in our effort to respond to Mike on the Hanford issues, or excuse me, on the Snake River issues, on the dams, we're being very respectful of his role at Hanford and hope that it's not somehow become a way it would change our working relationship with him. So that's part of my job, is to kind of walk that line very finely, thread that needle so that we can maintain good relationships with Mike on energy and water appropriations, both laboratory as well as Hanford cleanup, but also indicate our strong reservations about his proposal on dams.
Thanks. That was very well said, and obviously it is a very fine line to walk because we, as you say, we've always had a good relationship with Mike, and he is pretty critical in the appropriations work that we all work on for sure. I think I just wanted to bring up in some of our previous coffees with Karl's, we've had some other folks from the lab on, and again, talking about the diversity of the research that's done at the lab. There are some, fish recovery efforts that research that's done at PNNL directly affect it. So I think that, even though the dams necessarily aren't part of our Department of Energy discussion, the research, the relationships in DC, we are all kind of connected. So I think it's good to point that out. Let's get in some questions. We've got a few questions, and I'll just try to consolidate them into a real general question for Brian. And Brian, can you talk generally about how subcontracting works at the Hanford site? How from the primes down to the subs and how that operates and works, and how it relates to your one Hanford. I think maybe that's a good context to put it in.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. The EM organization and enterprise as a whole really does value small business participation and meaningful small business participation in all of the work. Each of the contracts has subcontracting requirements that they have to meet for the scope as so we can continue. And I think you saw in the slide, the amount of money that comes from the site to go to small businesses is not trivial. And it's important to continue to expand the opportunities for small businesses so they can grow and develop opportunities not only just here, but maybe in other places as well, and grow the business. So every year we go through a cycle where we evaluate contractor performance. Those small business goals are evaluated. And if they're not performing well, they're held accountable in, depending on the fee structure of the contract, they can be held accountable in fee. But they can also be held accountable through the annual process we use for contractor performance assessment reporting, which is internal to the DOE and internal to the federal government for ensuring that all of the federal agencies have an opportunity to see past performance and past history when they make selections on new contracts. And so those are all part of the general approach to business that we have here. And we certainly value the small business we have in the community. Here, they contribute a lot to our cleanup effort, and we want them to feel a part of that one Hanford vision and mission and an approach we're certainly advocating and implementing across the site, because the Hanford site is a community effort at its core, and having the small business as part of our team in furthering the mission, I think, is critically important, and will be important to us as we go forward.
I think that summed it up really well. We've got another one that I think is both for you and Roger, related to maybe some initiatives that are coming down from the new leadership at DOE in Washington, D.C. And it's, do you foresee any changes in clean energy or transportation requirements that may be applied to Hanford operations or PNNL, given the change in administration? I think I've read a couple articles where, there was going to be a drive to, maybe, I don't know, electrifying the fleet, or, something like that. Have you guys seen anything, or is it still in early stages?
I'll start, and Roger can chime in, because he's probably got some insights on the research side of it. It's early days, and so there's really nothing that's coming down formally yet relative to any goals. The secretary's been in the seat probably less than 2 weeks now, and the rest of the politicals in the headquarters haven't really come in yet. And so I think we all recognize that that's a likely focus as we go forward, but we just don't have any near-term objectives in that area. And we'll certainly continue to look for the opportunities where they represent and where the administration ultimately lands on the direction we receive.
I would add to that same situation. We haven't seen anything come down as direction or guidance just yet, but from a positioning standpoint, that is expected that we would be part of the implementation, as just like the Postal Service that you highlighted. I would say that also from a national lab standpoint, we also expect to be part of the demonstration of those technologies, because some of those technologies are in their infancy. There are new technologies coming out, and we're better to demonstrate them than as a national lab and use them ourselves.
Great point. Tim, I know you got to go. I think you have a previous engagement, but do you have any closing remarks for us before you sign off?
Well, yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm sorry I have to jump to a different meeting. So anyway, thanks for the opportunity. Appreciate the chance to talk to you folks. Enjoyed Brian's comments and Roger's comments, and enjoyed being on Coffee with Karl. It's quite a treat. By the way, I know I made it big now that I've been invited to participate on Coffee with Karl. In fact, our former late colleague, Slade Gordon, great guy. He had a great career, but for him, the topper was he made a bobblehead for him. And he thought that was just the coolest thing. He felt my career's been made. So I've now been made because I've been on Coffee with Karl. So anyway, thank you all.
Thanks, Tim. Have a good day. I guess we'll have to work on bobbleheads for all of our guests. I got a couple other questions. Roger, we talked a little bit about technology transfer and commercialization, but can we go a little bit deeper on that? And do you have any maybe suggestions that TRIDEC or the community, could help on that process? Anything that we could do. I think even just like you talked about the potential for this, maybe directive from DOE headquarters on, transferring to clean vehicles, and the demonstration project that PNNL maybe could do. Anything more on, the commercialization side, or thoughts on what can we do to help? How can we help build that robustness?
Well, I think there is a gap in many of the processes when you get from the research and the promise to the reality and the economics of an industry. And so we are working to help bridge that gap and I think actually demonstrating the technologies and their economics on our campus using the technologies, employing them, is part of that solution. We do really enjoy working with the community, and we think there are a lot of opportunities for some technologies that are iterative, like battery technology could be an area of good economic interest to the region as the technology changes. Being in proximity to a national lab and having that industry nexus could strengthen both sides. And so we're hopeful that there may be some things that come out of that as we start to work with industry more with the GSL facility. Once that's constructed, maybe more people will be coming into the Tri-Cities and see the economic opportunities. But I think it starts with the showcasing of what's possible and what's available, a bit of demonstration and implementation, and then it's probably more to the community to attract and hold.
That's great. Thanks. But again, great partnership. We look forward to those opportunities and working more. For Brian, you talked a little bit about the shift, back into maybe what it was like at Hanford in the 70s or 80s, back when obviously in operational mode, with the getting closer and closer to starting production on the vitrification plant. But can you go into a little more detail on that, Brian? Like, what does that look like? Has a lot of the work in cleanup been, more on coming up with the right process, to be able to transfer waste and do all those things? And now most of those processes have been identified. So now it's kind of getting into that production mode. So, okay, we're going to be on 24/7 making glass. Is that what you're talking about? Can you go a little deeper on that?
Yeah, sure. The cleanup along the river corridor is a pretty good example. We're down to just 2 major areas on the river corridor to clean up. And so the work is actually moving closer and closer to the central plateau, where the contractors are in closer proximity, and there's a natural coupling sometimes of the work. One needs to take out a road for a period of time to do work that impacts others, things like that. And so that's one aspect of it. There's also a timing aspect. When you think about a demolition project or a construction project, they work at a pace that's driven by demolition and construction, and the time horizon to deal with issues is, days, weeks, months. Because you really can stop and you can, do the analysis, do the research, get a team together, and make decisions. When we look at the way that direct feed low activity waste is going to operate, the vitrification plant is the center of it, but the tank farms need to be feeding at a rate to maintain the flow of feedstock for vitrification. There's downstream processes that have to occur at the effluent treatment facility and liquid effluent retention facility. They're byproducts of the vitrification process go there for processing. We have to have the integrated disposal facility operating. And we also really have to operate the infrastructure, power, water, sewer, roads. everything in a much higher pace. And so we're going from being able to make decisions in days, weeks, and months to minutes, hours, and days. And so it's a fundamental shift. And I liken it to when I was a junior officer on a submarine, and we went through a refilling overhaul. And so we had worked in the industrial environment for a long time, and you worked at one pace. When you actually take the ship to sea and submerge it, you're actually operating at a fundamentally different pace. And that's a transition we're making across the entire site, thinking about how we can make good, sound, conservative decisions at a much higher pace as a site leadership team. That seems trivial, but it's not. And getting all of the entities together and making those decisions quickly is really the big part of the transition we're trying to make.
Right. I would assume it's a completely different process, right? Based on the time, the amount of time that you have to reach that decision. So is that a big part of what you work on, is just how do we change process? And obviously I've heard you talk before about cultural change. Is that a couple of the factors you're working on?
Cultural change is part of it. We also issued a fundamentally new governance model for the site, which talks about how the contractors interface with each other and how they interface with the department, and really to streamline some of those discussions and processes to get decision points very quickly, because there's almost no decision at Hanford that doesn't have strategic implications. And so we have to be able to recognize the issue, get the right people together quickly, have a conversation, look at options, and make a good conservative decision at a time horizon that we really haven't had to in a long time. And that transition for everybody, it's almost a sense of deliberate urgency, right? We can't be frantic. We can't be under so much time pressure. We can't make those good decisions, but our processes and our mindset fundamentally have to shift. So we get into that mode where we can make those good decisions relatively quickly.
You bet. Roger, we're kind of under 10 minutes, but let's just do maybe a short question, and then I'll give you guys a few minutes for some closing remarks. You talked about STEM education and the work that, both DOE and Battelle is doing on, really supporting STEM education in Washington and throughout the region. But how, as the lab specifically for the future workforce and building that workforce, can you talk a little bit about, STEM education, all the other things that both DOE and Battelle are doing to support, that future workforce? I know, coming from Idaho and having discussions in the past with Idaho National Lab, they were having some challenges on workforce, not as it related maybe to work on the actual, site out in the desert, but as far as the researchers that, people with masters and above education wise, they were struggling with that. And can you talk a little bit about that as it affects PNNL and DOE on that STEM side?
Well, I think you said it well. STEM is an active pursuit, not only the department, but all of the national labs. And the efforts are really, as you said, focused on the workforce so that we have that pipeline of capability and expertise, because not everybody that comes through a STEM career wants to be at a national lab. We hope to attract the best and the brightest, but you have to have that pipeline. And then by hopefully cultivating interest, you start an individual on a path that at least keeps them in that field. It allows them to explore their options. And I've been involved where people that were from schools that didn't have that degree, didn't have a national lab in their backyard, didn't have that opportunity, and were just awakened as they had the environment that they could see how things connected, how the technology that they see and they experience in their real life drew from the technologies at the lab. Just simple connections like the PNNL salute you do at the airport when you put your hands over the head as you go through the detector, and the real world understanding the origins of that technology. And so I think it's all about the cultivation, but then you have other complications. We attract people to work at a national lab because of the exciting work we do in the communities that we live in, and associated with the complexities of the work. And sometimes that's national security, so you have to be able to be a clearance holder. And in some cases, you have to be working in more remote areas, like some of our labs. And so there's a dynamic there. And so I think working with the community, one of the key things we can do is make an attractive community to draw people in, because people have a lot of choices these days where they live. And it's not always where they work where they live because of remote capability, but we want people to be, comfortable working in an integrated way in our campus. And so it is not just the STEM fostering, it's the community engagement as well.
That's a great point. We've talked about it before, but in the economic development field that we work in, that includes supporting existing businesses and helping them grow and retain their employees across the board. But then when we're working with companies to come into town, that quality of life is becoming more and more important. Like it's higher on the hierarchy of companies as they look at communities. And it's the same reason that you just talked about for existing companies and existing employers, continuing to make the Tri-Cities a better place to live. More amenities, more things to do, more activities just builds our capabilities in so many different ways. And that's a great point. We're down to the end of the program. I just want to thank both of you guys for coming on today. This is always a really good discussion. You're always a part of our economic outlook. And, on behalf of TRIDEC and our board, we just appreciate the investment that Department of Energy makes in the Tri-Cities and such a big, huge driver historically, always has been and will be into the future for our economy. So, Brian, do you have some closing remarks you'd like to leave us with?
No, I appreciate the opportunity today. I think, the community is a critical part, I think, of our current state and certainly the future state as we continue this mission. We still have a lot of work to do here. And I think as I think about the Hanford site in a broader context of the community, this is simply a place that for a very long time has been found ways to take on very difficult and complex challenges and deliver truly remarkable results. And I think the community support for what we do has continued to be very strong, and we appreciate that very much. I know we appreciate the support we receive from our congressional members as well. And so, I think we're poised for probably an unprecedented period of cleanup progress over the next decade. And in many ways, we're not really trying to get back to where we were last year at this time, which is literally almost a year from when we reduced operations on the site. But I think we want to build on the experiences of the pandemic, the teamwork, our engagement with the community, and really start at a really a brand new level as conditions continue to improve. And we see, we can talk about COVID as something in the past, not in the present and the future. And so I think we're really excited about where we are as a Hanford site and a team. And I just really appreciate the community support, and I hope we're all looking for what is really to come, and we're excited about where we are and where we're going. So thank you all for that, and really appreciate the continuing great support.
Yeah, thanks, Brian. And I think that's, we didn't even get into the COVID, but I think, for both your offices, it's amazing the work that's still come out of COVID and trying to go through what sometimes was a daily, fluidity in the environment and what could be done and what couldn't be done. But, we didn't touch on it today. I think I know firsthand that the amazing accomplishments that have been done within that COVID environment, and having the flexibility amongst your teams to still be effective in your mission and meeting those goals while operating in a safe, COVID safe environment. So that we didn't even talk about that, but I appreciate your comments on that. Roger, do you have some closing remarks for us?
Brian touched on it so well. If he hadn't said the word Hanford, I would have thought he was talking about PNNL. So from this standpoint, it feels guilty to say it's been a great year because it's been so challenging for so many, but we still have persevered with our workforce really being resilient and finding creative ways to get work done. And so I do appreciate the advocacy from TRIDEC, the support from our congressional sponsors, and just all of the workforce working together with those sponsors to find ways. We've maintained our workforce here at a fraction of on-site as we used to. People are working much more remotely and coming on site when they have to do hands-on activity. And that's kept it safe, not only for the community, but also for each other and their coworkers. And so it's been a really interesting time to learn. A lot of new things that we've developed probably will shape us forevermore going forward as we think about what the future of work holds for us and how our workforce will be changing. We even concepts of remote science where you might be able to do more manipulation of your lab, et cetera. So I think it is an exciting time, but thank you again, Karl, for your leadership in this forum.
You bet. Well, thank you both for your time today. Great discussion. And, we look forward to more work together to benefit our community and the people that live here. So Just quickly for next week, we'll be on Thursday instead of Friday. We are going to have a group from the health district, and we're coming up on the 1 year situation with the COVID virus. So we're going to get that 1 year update from the health district. So thanks again for your time today. Appreciate it. And everyone have a great weekend. Thanks.